Welcome to an all-new episode of Get Lit with Lianna, the podcast. Join me as I sit down with a new guest author in each episode to discuss their books, careers, and everything in between. I'm so excited. Today I'm joined by actor and author Julia Whelan, who wrote the new book, Thank You for Listening. You may recognize her as the author of the romance book, My Oxford Year, which is such a devastating, incredible love story. I encourage everyone to read it if you have not yet. But I'm so excited to chat with Julia. Not only is she an actor and an author, but she's a prolific audiobook narrator. She actually is also a Grammy-nominated audiobook director, which is so cool. She's narrated so many of our favorite books, from like Gone Girl to One True Loves, so many. She does like 75 plus audiobooks a year, which is insane. But she wrote this incredible romance book, Thank You for Listening. It turns so much of the romance tropes and what we love about these love stories on their head. And it's just such a powerful story, all while still being so cute and giving you all those romance feels. So I cannot wait to have Julia on the show today to talk about this book and, of course, My Oxford Year and everything else she's currently working on. So without further ado, my conversation with Julia Whelan starts right now. Welcome, Julia, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here because I've been such a fan of your writing for a really long time. I read My Oxford Year like 2 years ago, I want to say, and I adored it. I mean, it destroyed me.
Yeah, sorry.
I adored it. I loved it so much. And then when I found out that you were writing this book and when I read the synopsis, I was like, this is perfect because given like your history and your background, what you're doing. So I'm so excited to have you here because I loved this book and I have so many questions. But before we get started, can you tell me about like your background? I know you've been doing a million things before you started writing, but like how did you even get into the whole author writing world?
It's a good question. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this. This is kind of like the first recorded interview that I've done about this. So I could have I'm going to stumble over myself probably a lot.
No.
But I was actually a child actor. And so I've always been an actor my whole life, but I've also always been interested in writing. And I left the business and went to college and studied writing there and graduated with a creative writing and English degree. And it was at my college graduation, actually, that one of my best friend's mothers came up to me, and she happened to be an audiobook director and producer. And she said, I feel like you might be good at this with an acting background and the creative writing background. And, you might look into this. And it just started from that. I sent her a demo, and then she got the approval to give me, a book or two. I think I did two for her to start, and it slowly started to build. And then I picked up, I looked up a couple of years into it and realized it was like my full-time job. And throughout that time, I was always writing. I was working on my other stuff. And like I had my college thesis that I was a novel and stories that I was rewriting. I was working on a YA novel. I was working on historical fiction. But part of it was I had to get like competent enough and secure enough as a narrator to be able to record someone else's books during the day and like be in someone else's voice for 4 days at a time or 5 days at a time, and then keep my own writing voice of whatever project I was working on intact. And that was tough. It disrupted everything for, I would say, a couple of years while I was establishing my narration career.
I was going to ask, because I can't imagine how you were able to like write your own stories at the same time as narrating other people's stories. Like you've narrated so many incredible books, but like when you're in that headspace, like how do you differentiate the two? Like, how do you separate them?
Well, first of all, part of it is I just being better at both things, like just experience, a couple of years of just getting better at both jobs. And doing, frankly, fewer audiobooks. Like I wrote My Oxford Year in kind of like a feverish sort of, I was under deadline and I was still doing like 70 audiobooks that year. And it was just entirely too many books. And I promised myself I wouldn't do that again, which is part of the reason that it's taken 4 years for another book, because I had to be able to get to the point where I could do fewer audiobooks. I do maybe 30 or 35 a year now.
Which is
And
still crazy numbers, right?
It's still a lot. It's still a lot, but it at least gives me the time that when I especially when I'm drafting, I think when I'm revising, it's easier, but when I'm really like building the world the first time through, it's tough to be the custodian of someone else's story, for sure.
So as an author though, what's it like to narrate someone else's work? Like what kind of prep goes into that even? Like I can't imagine, because I know like you can only speak to the books that you've written. Like I'm sure you're proprietary over how they're narrated and read and how people listen to them. So like, is there like a note?
I don't know. I don't know how authors do this. Like I'm like always in shock when I get like some generous compliment from another author about because I'm just like, I can't even imagine relinquishing that control. But I think that's also probably what gives them the confidence. Like they know that I know how difficult it is.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
I really do take care of it. And I think that, in terms of, I always read the book ahead of time, obviously, before I record. Like that way lies danger. Like I could just never wing it. You'll find out on page 400 that like a character was supposed to have a Russian accent or something. So I do a long, prep process. I do a pretty extensive prep read where I'm creating character lists, and then I'm also creating word lists that I need pronunciations for. And at that point, any questions I have, and I ask a lot of questions, go back through the, publisher, who, unless I'm close with the author. And, I want the author's opinion on everything. I want to do it justice.
So how long does it typically take to record an audiobook?
It depends on the book. I try to not push myself. Again, this is like, as I'm getting older and I'm learning my limits, I try not to do more than 2 finished hours a day, which is about 4 to 5 hours in the booth.
Wow. Okay.
And so if, I think the average book that I do is about 10 hours. So usually a good full work week.
Okay. And has there ever been a situation where like you're reading like because this is obviously, we love romance books over here, but like you're reading a really like steamy scene that isn't your own. Yeah. Does that like get awkward, or maybe is it awkward to read your own? Like tell me about.
I think that's just one of those things. Like, when I was starting out, it was definitely awkward. But you just get a nerd to it at a certain point.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's a line in Thank You for Listening that's like, Swanee asks, was it weird for you to record, your aunt's writing? And he's like, I mean, if you kill people for a living, doesn't matter who gives the orders. And like, there's a certain part of that feels really true. But I think that like, actually, if anything now, it's especially when I'm in romance, I get and I'm like coming to the end of a day, like I've been in it 2 hours, but like I know the next scene is going to be the sex scene, and like I'm so tired and I'm so done, but I'm like, I don't want to wake up and do this. Like I don't want to do morning sex. Yeah. So like I'm just
gonna power through.
I'm gonna power through.
Yeah.
And think of England. No, so yeah, it's
Oh my, I can't imagine what that's like. But before we get into Thank You for Listening, I need to just briefly touch upon my Oxford year, because as I mentioned, I read it and I adored it. I read it after reading Robin Lee's book, The Idea of You. She's the one who recommended, she actually recommended the book to me because she was like, there's similar tones and aspects to it and like the Britishness of it. Like, I really think that it's something you're going to enjoy. And it was an incredible recommendation because it like totally filled that like void that I was feeling. But obviously
Robin will often recommend that book, which I appreciate, but she'll often recommend it as like, if you would like to not be totally punched in the throat.
Yeah.
Like it was with The Idea of You. Here, read this one.
No, but it was amazing. But what was that like writing the book? Like, I know that you spent time in Oxford, right? So like, how did you create that story? Like, where did you draw the inspo for?
So this is like I realized belatedly that in the back of the book, the paperback or the ebook, there's an essay that I wrote about the writing process. And then I didn't record that essay for the audio for some reason.
Okay.
So people who listen to it have a very different understanding of how that book came together than people who read it.
Listen.
And in this book, I made sure I recorded the PS section because I don't know what happened. I literally don't know. Going back, thinking back like 4 years, I don't know why we didn't do that. So Oxford actually came out of a screenplay originally that was set up at a studio. And I was hired with a friend of mine to work on the screenplay as like the Oxford experts. And I just fell in love with the story. And over the year of working on the screenplay, they got to know me and got to know that I had opinions about the story and what I thought we could do with it. And one of the producers just said, like, do you think there's a book here? And I was like, that nothing has ever wanted to be a book more. Please let me write this book. And I just like reverse adapted, but then took everything that I'd been kind of hoarding story-wise, character-wise, like things that just could not fit into a screenplay. And I just put it into the book and created my own version of that story. So it was a really collaborative and interesting, like I said, reverse adaptation process, but it is so much of like what I was going through at the time with grief and death and dying and, the stuff that takes it out of the kind of rom-com plane was what I was living in and trying to grapple with myself. And so it's but I love that book.
I really love that book. And then you recorded the audio for it. So what was that like, recording an audiobook for your own book rather than someone else's? Like, how was that experience?
Surprisingly difficult. I was not expecting it to be as I was not expecting it to be as difficult as it was. And I think for a couple of reasons, like it's very hard to turn off the editorial brain for sure. I also was, in the throes of like debut author imposter syndrome. So I was just like, who wrote this? Oh my God. And also objectively, like even if I had just been given that book to narrate, it's a difficult book. Like it's first person present. So the emotions are right on the surface. It's 13 different British characters and differentiating the voices was challenging. I actually worked with an accent coach on that just to like, say, okay, I want to tweak Tom. I want Tom to be a little bit different than Charlie, than Maggie, than Jamie, than William. Like, how do I differentiate this? I think it was difficult because the book was difficult. And then it was difficult because I was sitting there like judging everything.
Right. I can't even imagine. And then you obviously did the audiobook for Thank You for Listening. So before we get into the story, can you give everybody who's listening right now, like the brief elevator pitch about what this book's about?
Oh God. Yeah. I know. First, help me do the elevator pitch because I'm like, again, I have first not really time. Done this.
I know we're doing the press for the first time kind of here.
Okay. So let's say that it's about a former actress turned audiobook narrator who, when she was first starting out in her career, did a lot of romance under an alias, but kind of moved on as quickly as she possibly could from that genre because of her own trauma and her own experiences in her life. She just doesn't buy what romance novels are selling. But because she has a grandmother who needs an extensive amount of care, she has an offer to do like one last romance novel. And she agrees to do it because the money's too good to turn down. And in doing it, she gets to know her co-narrator, who is the audiobook world's hottest, most enigmatic male voice who no one knows. And hijinks ensue.
It's so good. It's such an incredible premise and it's so different. And the fact that it's like set in Romancelandia and we have this whole audiobook narration, like narrator storyline, it's so different. Obviously, you can very much relate to it given your background and your history. But how did this idea come to you? Like, are you going to tell me now that you've had some like hot romance with a fellow narrator? Like what was the inspo?
No, quite the opposite. I will tell you exactly what happened. This idea first implanted itself about 10 years ago when I was doing a lot of romance. And And I was working with a narrator who's like a little brother to me. We'd been cast. I got him into the business, and we'd been cast to do this like a series together. And the emails and texts that we were sending back and forth, which were things like, how are you going to say this word? Are you moaning? Are you, how like breathy are you making that? And I was just like, this is hilarious. Like it's incredibly awkward and it's so weird, but it's objectively hilarious. And at that point, I didn't know exactly what I wanted what story was there. I just knew that we have such a funny job and it's so bizarre. But 10 years ago, audio was not what it is now. And even 5 years ago, right before I was getting like when my Oxford year was done and I was thinking about what else I wanted to do next, some of the feedback I was getting from, my editor and people, it was like, I'm not sure that people care enough about audiobooks for this to really, and I was like, I get it. Like, I think that's a legitimate concern, but then the industry exploded and it took off and it was like the right moment.
Crazy. It's such an epic story. And I love that you brought up the fact that you were like having funny text correspondence with your like fellow narrator, because the text and email banter in this book is amazing. And I have to tell you that I first started reading the book. I haven't listened to it on audio because I only received, as we know, like the physical copy, and I received a galley, like a digital, but I was reading it first on my e-reader, and all of a sudden it starts like jumping. And I was like, what's going on? Like, I'm not able to follow the story. Like, why is it jumping? So I was like, I'm just going to put the Kobo down and I'm going to pick up the physical book. And it was because of the text conversations. It was jumping for however it was formatted when it went on my thing. It was jumping. So I didn't even realize at the beginning that it was texts. And then once I started reading the physical book, I was like, this is epic. And normally texts and letters and emails and books, for whatever reason, it always like, pulls me out of the story.
Yeah.
But it was everything in this book. I was literally like, I have no shame, I'll tell you. I was literally flipping forward. I was like, hey, when do we get more of the text? Like when there's regular story, I was like, wait, I want more of their convo.
Oh, good, good.
So was that hard for you to write? Like, how did you, or like, even tell me how, I guess you kind of just said that it came to you because of that experience of having like those text conversations, prepping to record, but like, was it challenging to write in text email form, to move the story forward?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I knew I wanted to do it because that is so much of the way that we communicate in this industry. So it felt authentic for that reason. It also felt, because I was doing this kind of very loving, gentle send up of romance tropes. And I kind of had like a checklist of like, how many can I put into this book?
So many.
And so epistolary, I really wanted to play with. Yeah. And especially because that's where the relationship happens on the page. Like that's it. You don't have another option. It has to happen that way. Yeah. But what I did, I had written the first like 70, I'd written part 1 as part of the proposal, and we sold it on a proposal. So then when I sat down and was like, okay, now I've got to write the rest of the book. Yeah. I started with that correspondence straight through. Okay. Like just took them from beginning to end of that correspondence so that I could get to know the characters and what they were letting each other know about themselves and what they were also hiding about themselves. And like that seemed like where I did most of the character work. Okay. And in the audio version, are you voicing everybody yourself, or do you have someone else? It's all you. Yeah. I can't wait to listen. I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to listening to it. But I love that you also just brought up the fact that you really wanted to shove in as many like romance tropes, because so much of what I loved about this book, being a romance reader, is like how you quite literally like poke fun at the genre. And like you talk about like the HEA, and like when in that first scene when they meet at the bar and they're like talking about the romance books, and like so nice to like just see somebody who's like in it make fun of it and put it on the page. So was that like intentional for you to write from the beginning? Did you know you wanted to like kind of not flip it on its head, but like point blank be like, these are the stereotypes of romance books, but like I'm going to write a romance book at the same time? It was, what I wanted to have is like often how I felt when I was doing a lot of romance, and I kind of like burned myself out on it because it was just like that line. Some days you're just not in the mood for a happily ever after. And like performing them too, it's the artificiality of it can get really draining. But then as soon as I stopped and like I was like missing it, and I would find myself reading romance for fun,
Yeah.
like for myself. And so I had this kind of tension with it, although I always loved it more than the main character did, for sure. But for me, it was like, I didn't know if I could pull off writing like women's fiction about romance. And so that became a big question. And it was only when I was starting to like work on this, starting a draft, outlining it, and Emily Henry had sent me Beach Read to blurb. And I was like, oh, you can do it. Like it's a meta, you can write a meta book about bookish things.
Yeah.
And I think I can do this. And so it started out, my intention was to be a little bit more satirical, but I think as the last couple years happened and I just didn't, I wanted it to be fun. I was like, I want it to be fun. I want it to be enjoyable to people who love romance the way I do. Yeah. But to also like point out, like to perform it it's a thing. Yeah.
Wait, so was this, because you just mentioned the last few years, was this a total COVID project for you? Like when did you start writing it?
I started writing it before that, before COVID, but literally I'd written the proposal, and then sent it off to my agent and met with her on March 4th, 2020.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And so when
oh my God.
when I started actually working on it, I was deep in it. And I'm not sure I would have actually been able to write it as quickly as I did if I had other places to be.
Right. And then like how soon after you finished writing the book did you go and do the audio for it?
I mean, the book was, I'm trying to think. I think we finished like line edits at the end of this year, at the end of last year. I was doing copy edits. So like I've been working on it all spring, like the finishing touches, and then I recorded in April.
So fun. So it's such a crazy process. I can't imagine doing like both, like writing and then doing the narration, like the audiobook. It's so crazy. Another part of the book that I loved was the meet cute. How they meet in that restaurant. Like, how did that idea come to you? Like, I know you said that you had this whole concept before, but like the meet cute of it all. Since we're talking about romance books, and that's such a vital part.
That's a good question. Because I think I wanted it to be in that situation. It was like I wanted it to be a very normal meet. Like a guy walks up to a girl in a bar. That's it. It's not elaborate. It's not high concept. It's like the beginning of everything that usually goes wrong. Yeah. And she's so skeptical that she's like, here we go. But it actually, his charm just carries it through.
And it's such a good like first date. And there's so many tropes, like being snowed in, like the way that you just like trickled that in there. Like it was just so well done. And as like a romance book lover, there's just so many like nods to the genre and the tropes that were so like just delicious honestly to read. Like it was just so much fun. Loved it. But a whole other aspect of the book is obviously kind of a more serious side is Swanee's character and her like disability and how that traumatic event changed her entire life and the way she views her relationships and herself. So why was that important for you to incorporate into this story in particular?
Yeah. For me, I had written, my Oxford year to me is about the choice that sometimes I think we confront in our like mid-20s to late 20s of the dreams that I wanted, like everything I've been building towards. And do I want them anymore? Like now that I actually know what they mean, do I want to keep doing this, or do I want something else? Is there another dream to pursue? And I think for this book, I wanted to talk about what happens when we don't have that choice. What happens when our dreams are taken away from us and how we accept that or not.
That's so interesting. I never recognized that stark difference between the two, but that's so interesting.
Yeah, that there's a lack of agency for Swanee that Ella has. And it's a difficult decision that Ella has to make. And it takes the whole book for her to make it. But we are coming to Swanee's story where like the decision's already been made for her. What she has to do at this point is decide whether she's going to keep mourning the loss of that particular dream, or whether she can look at her life and say, actually, you've got a pretty great life. Like,
yeah,
just because it's not what you imagined, can you accept what you have and build on that?
right.
And it also felt like, again, this was sort of I thought this is what the book was going to be about when I was, conceiving of it and outlining it. I wanted it to be a journey of acceptance, but then something about the pandemic just made that really hit hard, where I was like, I think we can use stories about accepting all the things we can't change right now.
100%. The message in this book is so strong, and it's so much more than a romance book. And that's what I also loved about My Oxford Year. Like, every book that I've read of yours has just been so important, and it has come to me. Both of them have come to me at like the perfect time. So I don't know. That. I don't know what that says. We're clearly like aligned in some way, but
I love that's the stuff you can't. I mean, this is why, like, every time whenever you launch a book, like everyone, you've got the marketing component, the publicity component, but you cannot manufacture whatever crazy alchemy happens when like a book just falls into someone's lap when it's meant to. And that's the stuff that it's like, I can't control that, because I mean, there are people who pick up My Oxford Year and it's like, oh no, I don't want that. Yeah. Like, no, I see where that's going. I don't want it. I totally understand that. Walk away, pick it up in 3 more years.
Yeah, when you're ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
In both of your books, I find that you just do an incredible job at like building out big story worlds and a bunch of different characters and having so many different relationships. Is that hard for you to write when you're trying to focus also on like the main characters and their agency?
It can be. It can be. I mean, I think that like I because of the acting background, like to me, it's all character. All story is character. So there were many times in this book I had to like remind myself, like, it's not a book about Henry.
Yeah.
Don't like, I find him fascinating. I could write a whole book about him, but like not this book. And so it's how is it serving Swanee? How is it furthering the plot? But yeah, I love a richly inhabited world. I love books that do that.
Yeah. Also, I'm obsessed with how you name your characters in your book. Can you just talk to me about like the naming of them? Like, I can't imagine that that's an easy thing to do, because now you're putting these characters out in the world for everyone else to like judge and consider and have an opinion on. Like the same thing as putting out a book in the world, but the names I find are always, it's like such a hard and personal thing, I feel.
It is. I have a friend whose name is Swanee, although she spells it differently, because she's from she's also named after a regional Swanee, but a different regional Swanee. Okay. But for me, that name became, I was working on the aforementioned YA novel, which was about a girl who, west side of LA, like private school, fame adjacent. Mom was a celebrity publicist. Like, this was a novel I've been working on for years. And, and she suffered a sudden disfigurement. And it was like, I used to be a very pretty girl who had all these doors open for me because I was pretty and fame adjacent. And like, now I'm not. And I'd always thought that her name was Swanee. And I'd always thought that, that, again, that process of realizing you're not an ugly duckling, you're a swan, was her journey. Yeah. And so
oh my God. Wait, that actually just blew my mind. Oh, so that's actually incredible. I have like goosebumps. That's incredible.
Oh, thanks. So when I figured out what the story, I kind of knew like what I wanted the story to be, but I didn't totally have my main character yet, because I didn't know what her conflict was. It was like, if she's like me, if she's totally happy narrating, then like, where's the conflict? And it suddenly occurred to me that I could like cannibalize the character from this YA novel into this situation, and it would actually work really well.
So of all of the scenes that you wrote for this book, what was like the hardest scene, and what was the most fun, or the scene you loved the most?
I mean, all scenes are hard for different reasons.
Okay,
the actual recording scene that they do was difficult because it was about, the first version of it was like 40 pages, because I just was like, this is everything that could potentially happen in a recording scene. Plus having to write the other book, like the book within a book that they're recording.
Yeah.
So, that was difficult. The reveal, without giving too much away.
Yeah.
But how to do that the way, well, both reveals, how to do that the way that I wanted to do it. But yeah.
And
everything's hard.
What was like the most fun, or like the one that came maybe easiest to you?
I have nothing feels easy.
Okay.
I'm looking back. Fair. No, I mean, I'm trying to think of like, was there something? I think a lot of the Adaku scenes actually felt like just two friends together, and like that relationship felt very clear to me from the beginning, where there's like one friend who's always picking up the emotional slack for the other, until finally that just can't, that's unsustainable. That was I really liked her scenes.
Okay. And coming up next, like, what are we working on next? Can we talk about it?
We might be able to talk about it. I'm playing around, no promises, but I am playing around with the project that they record in the book. So I am playing around with Casanova LLC.
No, stop it.
Yeah, as like a straight up and down romance, like actually just doing a romance novel.
Oh my God. So, and then you can narrate the book in their voices.
And then I would get one of my guys to co-narrate that and actually do it the way it's supposed to be in the book.
No. That would literally actually blow my mind. Yeah. Is that going to be tough for you to like to write a romance like that? Like that's so, I feel so different than what you write.
It's different. Yeah. But I've, like I said, I think sometimes the story just lends itself to that. Like even the work that I've done preliminarily on it, I'm just like, oh, this is so much fun. Like, this is so much fun. God. Like it's just because it's, again, like I knew enough about the characters and the story that work had to be done, that it's like they've just been waiting. They're like, okay, do we get our turn now?
That's so fun. I will die for that. But we're at like still very early days.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't get, like I said, I don't know. Cause I don't even know what I want to do with it yet. I don't know if it's just going to be audio or if it would actually be, I have no idea. I just need to focus on actually getting it done. And maybe I won't do anything. Maybe I'll just be like, this is terrible. I can't possibly do anything with this, but we'll see.
No, it's such a fun idea. And like, I hope that you can figure it out and you feel good enough to put something out with it. Cause that's just actually genius.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it's also like, to me, it's a great story. Like, it's just a great story that deserves to live somewhere. Like it just, but beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm kind of in the position I was back when my Oxford year came out, which was like, I've got a couple of ideas that are percolating, but as you pointed out, like each book is really, distinct, and I'm not I can't, because of the day job, I'm not going to be one of those book a year writers, like bless them, I don't know how they do it, but I'm a slow writer. I'm a literary creative writing person who likes rom-coms, so like I don't just churn them out. I can't do it, but
okay, well, I'm so excited for whatever comes next. Hopefully it's Casanova, but if it's not and it's something different, that I will be the first person.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm really so grateful that you took time to talk to me about both of these books. I love them. I know everyone's going to love Thank You for Listening, especially the people that are listening and watching this. Like, they are romance diehards. So this is a book for them because they're just going to appreciate it just as much as I did,
It really is. I worry about, the expectation, same thing with Oxford, although I feel like when my Oxford year came out, we were kind of at the beginning of this like rom-com popular fiction, like what are we doing thing. Yeah. And now that it really exists, like the whole infrastructure really exists. There's a part of me that like always feels like with romance readers, it's like, I'm one of you. Like I'm one of you. And I'm not sure that this book like will satisfy every romance. Okay, great. Yay.
It does. It does. And when everybody starts to read this and you hear it from more than just me, you'll see, but everyone's going to love it. It just satisfies the craving and hits all the nails on the head. It just does all the things it needs to do. It's great.
Thank you. Okay,
my pleasure.
Yay.
Thank you very, very much for taking the time. I need to get this book on audio. So when it comes back, I'll slide into your DMs after I listen to it because I can't wait.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I look forward to it.